The most dangerous lies are the ones whispered to keep someone alive. Before we continue, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe dignity matters more than power, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Alana Brooks. The crystal chandeliers above the ballroom glowed like frozen stars, washing the entire hotel in gold light and expensive silence. Alana Brooks kept her eyes lowered as she carried a silver tray through the crowd, her black heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She had worked enough charity galas to understand one thing about wealthy people in Chicago. They noticed mistakes long before they noticed kindness, especially when the waitress serving them was a black woman from the South Side, wearing a borrowed uniform 2 sizes too small. Table 12 needs champagne. The floor manager snapped into her earpiece. Move faster, Alana. Yes, sir, she whispered quietly. Around her, diamonds flashed beneath soft lighting. Politicians laughed too loudly. Men in tailored tuxedos shook hands while pretending not to hate each other. The ballroom smelled like perfume, aged whiskey, and money old enough to forget compassion. Alana adjusted the tray against her palm and moved carefully between the tables, trying not to draw attention to herself. Invisible. That was how she survived this city. Invisible women kept their jobs. Invisible women made rent. Invisible women stayed alive. Then she heard the little girl crying. The sound was soft at first, almost swallowed by the orchestra playing near the stage. But Alana heard it immediately because pain always sounded louder when you grew up with it. Near the back hallway leading toward the private elevators, a little girl in a pale blue dress stood alone, tears sliding down her cheeks while clutching a stuffed rabbit against her chest. Maybe 6 years old, maybe younger. Rich families always dress their children like tiny royalty. Hey, sweetheart, Alana said gently, kneeling beside her. Are you okay? The little girl shook her head fast. I can't find Uncle Damien. Alana's stomach tightened slightly at the name. Everybody in Chicago knew that name. Damien Castellano, businessman to the newspapers, monster to everyone else. Before she could answer, the atmosphere inside the ballroom shifted. It happened so subtly most people missed it. A few men near the entrance suddenly stopped smiling. 2 security guards touched their earpieces at the exact same time. Somewhere behind her, a champagne glass shattered against the floor. Alana slowly looked up, and that was when she saw him. Damien Castellano moved through the ballroom like a storm, wearing a black tuxedo. Tall, broad shoulders, white skin sharply contrasted beneath the warm gold lighting. His dark hair was slicked back neatly, but there was something exhausted in his face tonight. Something colder than anger. Guests stepped aside instinctively as he crossed the room. Nobody wanted to stand in the path of a man whose silence carried more weight than most people's threats. His eyes landed on the little girl first. Relief flashed across his expression so quickly it almost disappeared. Then his gaze shifted toward Alana. For one suspended second, the noise of the ballroom seemed to fade completely. She suddenly understood why powerful men feared him. Damien's eyes were calm in the way deep water looked calm before drowning someone. Sophia, the little girl cried, running toward him. Damien crouched slightly, steadying her with one hand while scanning the room behind Alana with frightening focus. His posture changed instantly. Sharp, alert, predatory. Alana turned slightly, confused. 3 men had just entered through the north ballroom doors. Expensive suits, expressionless faces. One of them touched his jacket near the waist for less than half a second. Damien noticed it immediately. So did the security team, moving discreetly toward the exits. The little girl clung tighter to his arm. Uncle Damien, she whispered nervously. Damien never looked away from the men approaching. But slowly, carefully, he stepped closer to Alana until she could smell cedarwood cologne mixed with rain and cigarette smoke lingering faintly on his jacket. Then, in a voice low enough that only she could hear, the Mafia Boss whispered words that made her blood turn cold. When I say, run, his hand rested protectively against the child's shoulder. Call me Dad. Alana's heartbeat pounded so hard she could barely hear the orchestra anymore. The little girl clung to Damien Castellano's arm while guests continued laughing across the ballroom, completely unaware that something dangerous had just entered the room with polished shoes and expensive smiles. Listen carefully, Damien said quietly without looking at her. His voice remained calm, but his eyes tracked every movement near the entrance. When I move, stay close to me. Do not stop for anyone. Alana swallowed hard. What is happening? A problem, he answered simply. One of the men near the ballroom doors smiled faintly in their direction. Damien's expression did not change, but the muscles in his jaw tightened slightly. The little girl pressed her face against his side. Uncle Damien, I am scared. His hand immediately softened against her shoulder. I know, sweetheart. That contrast unsettled Alana more than anything else. 1 second, he looked capable of freezing an entire room with a glance. The next, he sounded like a patient father comforting a frightened child. Somewhere behind them, a waiter rushed past carrying fresh champagne glasses. The room still looked beautiful. Gold chandeliers, white roses, jazz music floating beneath conversations about stock markets and charity donations. But now Alana noticed details she had missed before. Security guards repositioning near exits. A woman in a silver dress quietly guiding her husband away from the ballroom center. The head of Damien's security team touching his earpiece while pretending to adjust his cufflinks. Everyone important already understood something was wrong. Everyone except the innocent people trapped inside the room. Do you trust me? Damien asked suddenly. Alana almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. Trust him? This was Damien Castellano. Mothers in Chicago used his name to frighten children into obedience. The newspapers called him untouchable. Men disappeared after crossing him. And yet standing this close to him, Alana noticed something the city never talked about. Exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion. Emotional exhaustion. The kind carried by people who had spent too many years expecting betrayal. I do not even know you, she whispered honestly. For the first time, the corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. More like sadness trying to remember what smiling felt like. Smart answer. The little girl suddenly looked up at Alana. Are you really my mom now? Alana blinked in surprise. Damien answered before she could. For the next few minutes, yes. Okay. The child whispered seriously, accepting it immediately the way children accepted impossible things when they felt unsafe. Damien extended his arm toward Alana naturally, as if they had done this 1,000 times before. Smile, he murmured. People watch fear. They ignore comfort. Alana hesitated only half a second before slipping her hand through his arm. The warmth of his jacket startled her. So did the steadiness of him. Around them, cameras flashed near the stage as some politician began thanking donors through a microphone. Applause echoed softly through the ballroom. Damien started walking. Slow. Controlled. The little girl held his free hand while Alana matched his pace beside him. Together they looked almost normal. A wealthy family leaving an event early. Nothing more. But as they crossed the ballroom floor, Alana noticed the 3 men changing direction. Following them. Her pulse jumped instantly. Do not look back again, Damien said quietly. You already noticed them once. That is enough. Who are they, she breathed. Men who pretend business is more important than children. His tone turned colder at the last word. Near the private hallway leading toward the elevators, Damien's security chief appeared beside them. Gray suit. Military posture. Calm eyes. Vehicle is ready downstairs, the man said softly. But the south exit is compromised. Damien stopped walking for the first time. Silence stretched for 1 dangerous second. Then somewhere deep inside the hotel, the lights flickered once. Twice. The orchestra abruptly stopped playing. And the entire ballroom fell into darkness. Darkness swallowed the ballroom so completely that for 1 disoriented second, nobody moved. Then came the sound. Gasps. Chairs scraping marble floors. Nervous laughter from people still trying to convince themselves the blackout was temporary. Alana's fingers tightened instinctively around the little girl's hand. Somewhere nearby, a woman whispered, "What is happening?" Damien Castellano did not answer anyone. In the darkness, his entire body became still in a way that frightened Alana more than panic would have. Predators became quiet before danger, not after it. Emergency lights flickered dimly along the walls, painting the ballroom in deep red shadows. The chandeliers overhead died completely, leaving only scattered crimson light across frightened faces and overturned champagne glasses. Damien leaned slightly closer to Alana. "Stay beside me." His voice remained low and controlled, but now she heard something underneath it. Urgency. The little girl buried her face against his side. "Uncle Damien, I know." He stroked her hair once without taking his eyes off the ballroom entrance. The 3 men were gone. Alana realized that instantly. The doors near the lobby stood partially open now, swaying slightly as if someone had passed through moments earlier. Her stomach twisted hard. "Where did they go?" she whispered. Damien's security chief answered quietly from beside them. "Exactly where Mr. Castellano expected." Then another sound echoed somewhere down the hallway. Not loud, just sudden movement. Fast footsteps. A scream cut through the ballroom before stopping abruptly. Panic exploded almost instantly after that. Guests rushed toward exits. Women grabbed purses and heels. Men shouted over one another while security tried to control the crowd. The orchestra members abandoned their instruments near the stage as waiters hurried toward the kitchens. The elegant charity gala dissolved into confusion within seconds. Damien moved immediately. One arm guided the little girl against his side, while the other steadied Alana through the chaos. "Elevators are no good," the security chief muttered. "Too exposed." Damien nodded once. "Service corridor." Alana stumbled slightly as the crowd surged around them. Someone crashed into her shoulder hard enough to nearly knock her tray free, but Damien caught her arm before she fell. His grip was firm without hurting her. Protective. Intentional. "Keep moving," he said calmly. She looked up at him, confused by how steady he remained while everyone else around them unraveled. "How are you this calm?" For the first time tonight, something dark flickered behind his eyes. "Because panic gets people buried." The answer chilled her instantly. They turned into a narrow hallway behind the ballroom, where the noise became muffled beneath thick hotel walls. The luxury disappeared here. No chandeliers. No violin music. Just industrial lighting, gray carpets, and the distant hum of ventilation systems. Alana's breathing finally started catching up with her fear. "I do not understand why they are after us," she admitted quietly while hurrying beside him. "I am just a waitress." Damien glanced at her briefly. "Tonight you stopped being invisible." Those words landed harder than she expected. Invisible. That was exactly what she had spent her entire life trying to become. Especially after her mother died. Especially after hospitals started sending overdue bills for her younger brother's heart treatments. Chicago was cruel to women like Alana Brooks. Quiet girls survived longer. Girls who got noticed ended up broken. Ahead of them, the security chief pushed open a heavy metal service door leading toward the employee elevator corridor. Cold air rushed inside, carrying the faint smell of rain from outside. Then Damien suddenly stopped walking. Alana nearly collided with him. His expression changed instantly. Cold. Sharp. Listening. Somewhere nearby, footsteps echoed slowly against concrete floors. Not hotel guests. Too measured. Too calm. The little girl looked up nervously. "Uncle Damien?" Damien crouched slightly beside her, adjusting the small blue coat around her shoulders with surprising gentleness. "Remember what I told you, Sophia?" She nodded silently. "Good girl." Then he stood again and looked directly at Alana for the first time since the blackout began. The red emergency lights cast shadows across his face, making him look less like a businessman and more like the dangerous man Chicago whispered about after midnight. "From this moment on," he said quietly, "you stay close enough that they believe you belong to me." The service corridor felt colder with every step they took. Gone were the chandeliers, the music, the polished smiles of wealthy donors pretending the world was kind. Down here, beneath the luxury hotel, everything smelled like concrete, rainwater, and machinery humming behind steel walls. Alana stayed close beside Damien Castellano exactly the way he instructed, though every instinct inside her screamed to run in the opposite direction. Sophia held tightly to Damien's hand, her small blue shoes moving quickly across the gray floor while red emergency lights flashed overhead in slow intervals. Every few seconds the hallway turned crimson, then dark again. Crimson. Darkness. Crimson. Darkness. Like the building itself was breathing. Damien's security chief walked ahead of them, one hand pressed discreetly against the earpiece hidden beneath his collar. "Garage team is not responding," he muttered quietly. Damien's expression hardened immediately. "Say that again." No contact for 90 seconds. Silence followed. Heavy silence. The kind adults used when children were nearby and fear needed disguising. Alana noticed Damien glance down towards Sophia before speaking again. "Alternative route. Kitchen exit on lower level. 3 blocks east from there." Damien nodded once. "Do it." The security chief disappeared around the corner ahead. Alana looked at Damien carefully now. The city painted him as untouchable, cold, ruthless. But standing beside him in this dim corridor, she noticed something else. Calculation layered over exhaustion. Every decision seemed to carry invisible weight. "You knew this could happen tonight," she said quietly. Damien did not answer immediately. Instead, he adjusted Sophia's coat again, making sure the child stayed covered from the cold air drifting through the hallway vents. "People with power always know trouble is coming," he said finally. "The question is whether innocent people get caught in it." The answer sat heavily between them. Alana thought about the ballroom upstairs. The waiters. The musicians. The cleaning staff probably hiding in storage rooms right now, praying to get home safely. Ordinary people trapped inside rich people's wars. They reached the employee elevator corridor at the far end of the hallway. Stainless steel doors reflected the flashing emergency lights in broken waves of red. Damien stopped suddenly again. His entire posture sharpened. Alana heard it a second later. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Approaching from somewhere beyond the lower stairwell. Sophia pressed closer against Damien instantly. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. The words were calm, but absolute. Alana obeyed without thinking. Damien stepped slightly in front of both her and the child, broad shoulders blocking them from view. For one strange second, Alana forgot he terrified half the city. Right now, he simply looked like a father trying to shield his family from danger. The footsteps faded unexpectedly. Silence returned. Damien narrowed his eyes slightly, listening. Then the elevator dinged softly behind them. Alana jumped at the sound. The steel doors slid open slowly. "Empty. Thank God." Inside, Damien ordered. They stepped into the elevator quickly. Damien pressed the button for the underground kitchen level while the doors began closing inch by inch. Just before they shut completely, Alana saw movement at the far end of the hallway. A man in a dark suit standing perfectly still beneath the emergency lights. Watching them, her breath caught instantly. The elevator doors sealed shut. The small space became painfully quiet except for the mechanical hum carrying them downward. Sophia leaned sleepily against Damien's side now, exhausted from fear. Damien rested his hand gently against the back of her head. Protective, careful, human. Alana stared at him in confusion. "Why is she with you tonight?" she asked softly. Damien's eyes stayed fixed on the glowing elevator numbers overhead. "Because her parents are gone." Something in his voice changed at the word gone. Not anger. Something worse. Grief buried so deep it had fossilized. Alana looked down. "I am sorry." He gave a faint nod, but said nothing else. The elevator continued descending through the building. Floor 14. Floor 13. Floor 12. Then suddenly the lights flickered hard above them. The elevator jerked violently once before stopping completely between floors. Sophia gasped softly. Darkness swallowed the elevator for half a second before dim emergency lights blinked on overhead. Alana's stomach dropped. Damien looked toward the ceiling slowly, jaw tightening. Then for the first time all night, Alana heard genuine concern enter his voice. "That," he said quietly, "was not an accident." The elevator remained perfectly still between floors, humming faintly like a machine holding its breath. Red emergency lights glowed overhead, painting Damien Castellano's face in deep shadows, while Sophia clung tighter to his side. Alana could suddenly hear every small sound inside the cramped space. Her own breathing, the soft buzz of damaged wiring, the nervous tremble in Sophia's tiny voice. "Are we stuck?" the little girl whispered. Damien crouched beside her immediately, one hand smoothing gently over her hair. "Only for a minute, sweetheart." His tone stayed calm enough to comfort a frightened child, but Alana noticed his eyes scanning the elevator ceiling, the control panel, the emergency hatch above them. Always calculating, always preparing. "Marcus," Damien said quietly into the silence. No answer came through his earpiece. Just static. Damien pressed his jaw tighter. The security chief was gone now, or cut off. Alana felt cold settle deeper into her chest. "Can they reach us in here?" she asked softly. Damien looked toward the closed elevator doors for a long moment before answering. "Yes." The honesty frightened her more than lies would have. Sophia's small fingers tightened around Damien's sleeve. "Uncle Damien, I want to go home." Something flickered across his face at those words. Pain. Real pain. "I know." He pulled her carefully against his chest for a moment, shielding her from the fear inside the elevator like he could physically hold danger away from her. Alana watched him quietly, confused all over again by the contradiction standing beside her. Chicago described Damian Castellano as ruthless, untouchable, dangerous, yet the child in his arms clearly trusted him completely. Children always knew who felt safe. Another violent flicker passed through the emergency lights overhead before stabilizing again. Then suddenly a metallic sound echoed above them. Movement somewhere inside the elevator shaft. Alana froze instantly. Damian heard it too. His posture sharpened immediately. "Stay behind me," he said quietly without raising his voice. Alana obeyed without thinking. The confined elevator suddenly felt impossibly small. Damian moved closer to the doors while positioning both her and Sophia behind him instinctively, broad shoulders blocking them from view. Another sound scraped overhead. Closer now. Sophia buried her face against Alana's side. Alana wrapped one arm protectively around the little girl while trying to steady her own breathing. "How can you stay so calm?" she whispered toward Damian. His eyes never left the elevator doors. "Because fear spreads faster than fire." Then his gaze shifted briefly toward Sophia. "And children remember the adults who panic around them." The words hit Alana unexpectedly hard. Memories surfaced before she could stop them. Hospital hallways smelling like antiseptic. Her younger brother shaking with fear before surgery at 10 years old. Her mother smiling through tears because children always noticed fear first. Alana looked at Damian differently after that. Not softer exactly, but deeper. Another loud metallic clang echoed through the shaft above them. Then silence again. Long silence. Sophia looked up nervously. "Are the bad men coming?" Damian knelt in front of her once more, carefully adjusting the stuffed rabbit slipping from her arms. "Listen to me," he said gently. "No matter what happens next, you stay with Alana. Understand?" Sophia nodded slowly. Alana's heartbeat quickened instantly. "What happens next?" Damian stood again without answering her directly. Instead, he removed his tuxedo jacket and draped it carefully over Sophia's shoulders because the elevator had grown colder. The gesture felt strangely intimate, protective in the quietest way possible. Alana stared at him in disbelief. "You are worried about her being cold right now?" For the first time all night, Damian looked directly at her without the armor of power covering his face. "People like me," he said quietly, "do terrible things when they forget children are still watching." Before Alana could answer, the elevator suddenly lurched violently downward half a floor. Sophia cried out softly. Sparks flashed briefly above the control panel before fading into darkness again. Then came a new sound. Voices. Faint but unmistakable. Men speaking somewhere beyond the elevator doors. Damian's expression turned to stone instantly. He stepped forward slowly, every movement controlled now. "Dangerous. Alana," he said quietly without looking back at her. "If those doors open, you do exactly what I say the second I say it." The voices outside the elevator grew clearer by the second. Calm male voices. Unhurried. That frightened Alana more than shouting would have. Dangerous men never rushed when they believed control already belonged to them. Sophia pressed herself tighter against Alana while Damian Castellano stood motionless before the elevator doors, every line of his body sharpened by tension. The dim emergency lights painted shadows across his face, turning him into exactly the kind of man Chicago feared after midnight. Then the elevator speakers crackled overhead. Static hissed through the small metal box before a voice finally emerged. "Mr. Castellano." The smoothness of the voice made Alana's skin crawl instantly. "You are making this more complicated than necessary." Sophia looked up in confusion. Damian did not react. "Open the doors," the man continued calmly. "Nobody else needs to be frightened tonight." Damian's expression remained unreadable. "You already frightened a child," he answered quietly. "That was your mistake." Silence followed. Then a faint chuckle echoed through the speaker system. "Still pretending morality matters in your world, Damian?" Alana glanced toward him carefully. For the first time tonight, genuine anger flickered behind his eyes. Not rage. Worse, controlled disappointment. "You came into a room full of civilians," Damian said. "You shut down elevators during a charity event." His voice lowered dangerously. "You involved a little girl." Another pause. The little girl was never the target. The words settled heavily inside the cramped elevator. Alana's stomach tightened immediately. Damian's eyes narrowed slightly. Then who? Silence answered him this time. Long enough for the truth to become obvious. Slowly, Damien turned his head toward Alana. The realization hit her 1 second later. Me? She whispered. The elevator suddenly felt colder. The voice returned through the speakers. The waitress heard something she should not have heard upstairs. Unfortunately for her, she became important. Alana's pulse hammered painfully now. She remembered the ballroom. The 3 men near the entrance. One of them speaking quietly near the service hallway before noticing her standing too close with the champagne tray. She had overheard only fragments. Shipment. Midnight transfer. Lower docks. At the time it meant nothing. But apparently it meant enough to make strangers hunt her through a luxury hotel. I did not tell anyone anything, Alana whispered shakily. I do not even know what I heard. Maybe not, the voice replied calmly. But uncertainty creates risk. Sophia looked up nervously at Damien. What are they talking about? Damien immediately softened his expression before answering her. Adult problems, sweetheart. Then he looked back toward the speaker above them. You shut down an entire building because a waitress overheard half a conversation? Not because she overheard it, the man corrected. Because you chose to protect her. Silence swallowed the elevator again. Alana stared at Damien in disbelief. Why would that matter? Damien answered quietly before the voice could. Because enemies study what powerful men care about. The truth behind those words felt old. Painfully old. Like experience carved into bone. Suddenly the emergency lights flickered hard again. Somewhere above them, machinery groaned loudly inside the shaft. The elevator trembled slightly. Sophia whimpered softly. Instantly Damien moved toward her, crouching beside the child despite the tension surrounding them. Look at me, he said gently. You remember the breathing game? Sophia nodded shakily. Damien inhaled slowly. Good. Together now. Alana watched in stunned silence as the feared Mafia Boss sat on the dirty elevator floor, teaching a frightened little girl how to steady her breathing while enemies waited outside. Inhale. Exhale. Slow. Patient. Human. The elevator speakers crackled one final time. This is your last opportunity, Damien. Damien stood slowly after Sophia calmed down, adjusting the oversized tuxedo jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. Then he looked directly toward the elevator camera hidden in the upper corner. His voice turned ice cold. You made one mistake tonight. Silence. You assumed fear changes who I protect. The lights suddenly died completely. Total darkness swallowed the elevator. Sophia gasped softly beside Alana. Then came the deafening metallic sound of the elevator doors beginning to force themselves open from the outside. The elevator doors groaned violently as metal strained against metal somewhere beyond the darkness. Sophia cried softly beside Alana while the little emergency lights struggled back to life overhead, flickering weak red across the cramped elevator walls. Damien Castellano stepped forward immediately, placing himself between the opening doors and the two of them without hesitation. Protective. Absolute. A narrow gap appeared between the doors. Cold air rushed inside, carrying the distant smell of rain and concrete from the lower maintenance floors. Through the opening, Alana saw only shadows at first, then polished black shoes. Men waiting outside. Damien's expression turned completely unreadable. Sophia, he said quietly without looking back. Close your eyes for me. The little girl obeyed instantly, burying her face against Alana's side. That trust hit Alana harder than fear. Children only listened that quickly when they believed someone would protect them no matter what happened next. One of the men outside the elevator finally spoke. This does not need to become ugly tonight, Damien. Damien's voice remained calm. You should have thought about that before involving civilians. The waitress was an accident. No, Damien answered coldly. Your mistake was deciding her life mattered less than your convenience. Silence followed those words. Alana stared at him in disbelief. Nobody had defended her like that before. Not managers. Not customers. Not landlords threatening eviction notices over late rent. Women like Alana Brooks learned early that survival usually happened alone. Yet here stood the most feared man in Chicago, treating her safety like something valuable. The elevator doors opened another few inches before stopping again with a painful metallic screech. Still jammed halfway. One of the men outside sighed softly. You cannot shield everyone forever, Damien. Something changed in Damien's face then. Not anger. Memory. The kind that hurt deeply enough to leave permanent marks behind a person's eyes. I know that better than anyone. The hallway outside fell silent after that answer. Even the men beyond the door seemed unsettled by something in his voice. Alana looked toward him carefully. The exhaustion she noticed earlier suddenly made sense now. This was not just a powerful man protecting strangers because of pride. This felt personal, painfully personal. Damien slowly turned toward Alana for the first time since the elevator stopped. When those doors open wider, he said quietly, "You take Sophia and run down the maintenance corridor to the blue exit signs." Alana's stomach dropped instantly. "What about you?" "I will handle the delay." "No," the word escaped her before she could stop it. Damien blinked once, almost surprised by her response. Alana shook her head hard. "I am not leaving you here alone." For one strange second, the tension inside the elevator softened. Not disappeared. Softened. Damien looked at her differently now. Not like frightened staff. Not like collateral damage. Like someone who had chosen courage while terrified. "You barely know me," he said quietly. "I know Sophia needs you," Alana answered. "And I know you have spent this entire night protecting everyone except yourself." Silence settled heavily between them. Then Sophia's tiny voice broke through it. "Did you lose somebody too?" Damien froze completely. Alana looked down in confusion. Sophia opened her eyes slowly, clutching the stuffed rabbit tighter against her chest. "You look sad the same way I did after Mommy and Daddy went to heaven." The words landed like shattered glass inside the cramped elevator. Damien looked away immediately. His jaw tightened hard enough that Alana could actually see the muscle shift beneath his skin. For the first time all night, the dangerous mask slipped completely. What remained underneath was grief. Old grief. Heavy grief. The kind powerful men buried beneath expensive suits and cold reputations. "Yes," he answered finally, his voice rougher now. "I lost someone." Sophia studied him carefully with the painful honesty only children carried. "Is that why you protect people?" Damien stared at the half-open elevator doors for a long moment before answering. "No." Then slowly, quietly, he looked back toward the child. "It is why I failed to protect them before." The hallway outside suddenly erupted with distant shouting somewhere beyond the maintenance corridor. Multiple voices. Running footsteps. Confusion spreading fast through the lower floors. The men outside the elevator shifted immediately. One cursed under his breath. Damien's eyes sharpened instantly. "Opportunity." "Alana," he said quietly. "When I count to 3, you run." 1. Damien's voice cut through the tension like steel wrapped in velvet. The men outside the elevator shifted immediately as distant shouting echoed louder through the maintenance corridor. Somewhere beyond the concrete walls, hotel alarms suddenly began blaring in long mechanical waves. Red emergency lights pulsed harder overhead. Sophia grabbed Alana's hand tightly. 2. Damien stepped closer to the half-open elevator doors, broad shoulders blocking the narrow opening completely. Calm. Unshaken. Like chaos itself had learned not to touch him directly. Alana stared at him in disbelief. Most people protected themselves first when fear arrived. Damien Castellano protected everyone else before thinking about his own escape. 3. Everything happened at once. Damien shoved the damaged elevator doors apart with sudden force, while voices outside erupted in confusion from the opposite hallway. "Now," he ordered sharply. Alana did not hesitate this time. She grabbed Sophia's hand and ran exactly where Damien told her, through the dim maintenance corridor lined with pipes, exposed wiring, and flickering red lights. Behind her, she heard footsteps, men shouting, metal doors slamming somewhere nearby. But over all of it, Damien's voice remained terrifyingly calm, controlling the chaos instead of drowning inside it. Alana's lungs burned as she hurried down the narrow hallway with Sophia beside her. The little girl struggled to keep pace in shiny dress, shoes meant for ballroom floors instead of concrete corridors. "I cannot run anymore," Sophia gasped softly. Instantly, Alana scooped her into her arms despite exhaustion clawing through her own body. "You are doing so good, sweetheart." The child buried her face against Alana's shoulder, clutching the stuffed rabbit tightly while alarms echoed overhead. Ahead, blue exit signs glowed faintly near a steel service door at the far end of the corridor. Almost there. Almost safe. Then footsteps sounded behind them again. Fast. Closing in. Alana's heartbeat spiked painfully. She pushed herself harder despite the weight in her arms. The service door burst open suddenly before she reached it. Alana froze instantly. A tall man in a gray overcoat stepped inside from the rain-soaked alley beyond the hotel. For one terrible second, she thought they had been caught. Then the man spoke quickly. "Miss Brooks." Alana blinked in confusion. "What?" "Mr. Castellano sent me." The man stepped aside immediately, revealing a black SUV idling behind him in the alley while rain poured heavily across the city streets. "We need to move now." Alana hesitated only briefly before carrying Sophia toward the vehicle. Cold rain soaked her uniform within seconds the moment they stepped outside. Chicago thunder rolled overhead, while water reflected red emergency lights across the pavement like broken glass. The man opened the SUV door quickly. Warm air rushed out from inside the vehicle. "Get in." Alana climbed inside carefully with Sophia still in her arms. The doors shut heavily behind them, muting the storm outside almost instantly. The interior smelled faintly like leather and cedarwood cologne. "Damien's cologne. Where is he?" Alana asked immediately. The driver adjusted his rearview mirror but did not answer right away. "Handling the situation." The careful wording unsettled her instantly. Sophia curled against Alana sleepily now, emotionally exhausted after the nightmare inside the hotel. Alana brushed damp curls away from the child's forehead while rain hammered softly against the SUV windows. "Is Uncle Damien coming?" Sophia whispered weakly. The driver finally looked back toward them. "He always comes back for family." "Family." The word settled strangely inside the quiet vehicle. Alana stared out the rain-covered window at downtown Chicago sliding past in blurred gold and red lights. Hours ago, she had simply been another invisible waitress carrying champagne through a luxury ballroom. Now armed strangers were hunting her because she overheard something she never understood. And somehow the most feared man in the city had risked everything to keep her alive. The SUV finally turned beneath a gated underground entrance several miles from the hotel. Security cameras followed the vehicle as massive steel gates slowly opened ahead. The driver parked inside a dim private garage lined with black vehicles and silent guards wearing tailored suits. One of them approached immediately and opened Alana's door respectfully. "Mr. Castellano prepared rooms upstairs for you both." Alana stepped out carefully with Sophia still asleep against her shoulder. "Prepared." The guard nodded once. "He said if tonight went wrong, you would need somewhere nobody could find you." Alana looked toward the silent elevator waiting nearby. Suddenly, one painful realization settled into her chest. Damien had planned for danger long before the gala even began, which meant somewhere deep inside himself, he had already expected betrayal tonight. Rain continued falling across Chicago long after midnight, turning the city outside into blurred reflections of gold streetlights and dark glass towers. Inside the Castellano safe house, silence replaced the chaos from earlier like a fragile kind of mercy. Alana stood near the enormous windows of the private penthouse suite, still wearing the damp black waitress uniform from the gala, while Sophia slept peacefully on the oversized cream-colored couch nearby. Someone had changed the little girl into warm pajamas sometime during the last hour. The stuffed rabbit remained tucked carefully beneath her arm. Alana stared at the sleeping child with exhausted eyes. Safe now, at least for tonight. The penthouse around her looked nothing like the life she knew. Marble floors, soft amber lighting, shelves lined with leather-bound books, quiet jazz music playing somewhere low in the distance. Even the air smelled expensive. Cedarwood, coffee, and rain. Yet despite all the luxury, the place felt strangely lonely, like nobody inside it had truly rested in years. A soft sound behind her made Alana turn quickly. Damien Castellano had finally returned. His black dress shirt was slightly wrinkled now, dark hair damp from rain, exhaustion shadowing his face deeper than before. But the moment his eyes landed on Sophia sleeping safely across the room, something inside him visibly loosened. Relief. Real relief. He crossed the room quietly and adjusted the blanket around the child with gentle hands before saying anything else. Alana watched him carefully. "You came back." Damien glanced toward her briefly. "I said I would." His voice sounded rougher tonight, stripped clean of the cold polish he wore at the gala. For several quiet seconds, neither of them spoke. Rain tapped softly against the windows while distant thunder rolled somewhere over Lake Michigan. Finally, Alana broke the silence. Who were those men, really? Damien remained standing near Sophia for a moment before answering. People who mistake fear for power. And me? She asked quietly. What happens to me now? Damien looked toward her fully then. Tired blue eyes meeting hers across the dim room. Nothing happens to you. Alana almost laughed at that. Men chased me through a hotel because I overheard a conversation. And now they know you are under my protection. His tone stayed calm. Certain. As if those words alone changed the balance of the entire city. Maybe they did. Alana lowered her gaze briefly. I cannot stay here forever. I know. Damien walked slowly toward the kitchen area and poured himself a glass of water instead of whiskey. That surprised her. Most men carrying his kind of darkness usually drank to bury it. Tomorrow morning, he said quietly, someone will bring your brother here. Alana's breath caught instantly. Marcus. Damien nodded once. His medical records too. I already contacted a cardiologist downtown. Alana stared at him in complete shock. Why would you do that? Damien leaned both hands against the marble counter for a long moment before answering. Because children should not pay for adult failures. The words settled heavily inside the room. Alana suddenly understood. This had never been about guilt from one bad night. This went much deeper. The person you lost, she whispered carefully. Was it your daughter? Silence filled the penthouse. Damien looked toward the rain outside the windows instead of answering immediately. Then finally he nodded once. Barely. 7 years ago. His voice almost disappeared on the words. I was late getting to her. Alana's chest tightened painfully. Damien continued staring into the storm beyond the glass. Power makes people believe they can control timing. That they can always arrive before tragedy does. He swallowed once hard. Sometimes they are wrong. The room fell completely silent after that. No Mafia Boss. No powerful legend whispered about across Chicago. Just a grieving father standing alone beneath soft penthouse lights carrying a loss too heavy for one life. Sophia shifted slightly in her sleep, then murmured softly, still clutching the stuffed rabbit. Damien crossed the room immediately to check on her, kneeling beside the couch with quiet instinctive care. Alana watched him in silence. The feared man who terrified politicians and criminals alike gently tucked a blanket around a sleeping child at 3 a.m. because somewhere deep inside himself, he still blamed the world for failing one little girl years ago. And in that quiet penthouse while rain washed the city beyond the glass, Alana Brooks finally understood something Chicago never did. The most dangerous people were not always the cruelest ones. Sometimes they were. Simply the people who had loved deeply once and never survived losing it.